Hi, everybody. We're going to get started here in just a couple minutes. So if you can make your way into whatever room you're going to have a session in, we'll get started in the CHS room in just a couple minutes with these pesticide credits talks, which I know a lot of you are interested in. Oh, no. That's all right. You're telling me I'm going to get in trouble.
All right, you guys, let's get back in here and get this show going.
Y'all heard Daryl. All right. Yeah. All right, so we're going to get started here with our first session in the CHS room. We have a great talk from Tim Miller, Effects of Cane Burning on Older Raspberry Fields.
That's it. Thanks, Betsy. Oh yeah, well, I really appreciate that. There's room in the other venue there if you really want to sit somewhere. Okay, we're going to talk about raspberries. You had all this blueberry stuff. You tired of blueberries now? We're going to talk about raspberry. And I've got a couple of different things I want to visit with you about this morning. The first one is, as on the title here, this cane burning trial that we had going on. But I do want to talk to you a little bit at the end, so I'm going to try to get through this fairly quickly. So I'm going to kind of split it up into two areas. I want to talk about some baby raspberry work we're doing as well for those who are putting in new fields, just so you know kind of what to do herbicide wise, or what we found over the last few years. So anyway, let's start on the cane burning trial. I want to visit with you about that. It's a 2-year trial we've had going on, working with Washington Raspberry Commission as well as British Columbia RIDC. Both funded this as kind of a project that they both were interested in, because this was something that came out of our research review as being something that we wanted to get some more information on, the whole cane burning aspect. What do we do with these older fields? So we got an older field that's kind of going down in vigor. You don't really want to replace it quite yet, but you're wondering, how do I do cane burning on that older field? Should I do it? Should I change the way I do my applications? Are there certain products that I should avoid? And that kind of thing. So we wanted to set this up along that line to get a sense for how do we treat these different bigger fields. And I got to tell you that it was the research review that kind of got that going, and Randy was in the room. Randy Honkoop was the cooperator on this, which I really appreciate, because he knows what untreated checks look like. And some of these, even the treatment checks are probably, I know he cringes every time he goes on the road. But they'll come back, Randy, they'll come back. But he was the one that kind of had this bright idea. And so I naturally said, well, Randy, it's your idea. We better do this at your place. And he to his credit, said, you betcha, let's do it at my place. We found a meeker field that had been planted in 2010. This was in spring of last year, 2017. And he had been kind of noticing how this field, one end of the field was less vigorous than the other end of the field. So he kind of walked around out there. I did a bunch of cane counts in between the posts, and we set up this trial with a low vigor section. I got that in quotes, and then I've got a high vigor section. Vigor is one of those weird things that you can't really put a finger on. It's this means low vigor, this means high vigor. So I'm just kind of using that as a generalized term here. I did want to, however, treat both of those exactly the same cane burning wise. So if you think about it, we had two separate experiments, one on the low vigor and one on the high vigor, but they got the same cane burning treatments as each other. Let me talk about what the treatments are, just so you got an idea of what we're dealing with here. If you look at these, I think we've got pretty much what everybody does somewhere in one of these treatments should match kind of what you're doing. And I'm just going to put the rest of them based on the number. If you got some questions on it, we'll have a report out on this thing next spring, so we'll have a better idea of how this thing all turns out. So the number one treatment was basically we're not treating in the row at all. We're not doing full bed cane burning. We're just going to treat on the side of the bed late in the season. So it's a late treatment with AIM, well down into the growing season. So nothing early. We wanted to get those private canes up and going and see if that made any difference as far as vigor and everything else. The 2 and 3 were very similar. The only difference between number 2 and number 3 was the timing of that first treatment. We were using AIM in this case. Early treatment, we were aiming at those 1 to 2 inch tall primate canes, the first ones that are coming up. The standard treatment is usually that 4 to 6 inch canes. So that's the difference between those two. It's really how long you let it go before you hit that with the first shot of AIM. We did a full bed burn, so all the way into the center of the row, and we did no late season treatments on those plots. So just one shot of AIM, full bed, either at that 1 to 2 inch or 4 to 6 inch. 4 and 5 are also very similar. Again, it's the early treatment to the full bed with AIM, or the standard treatment, which again is that 1 to 2 inch or 4 to 6 inch. But these got a late season treatment. Later on, when those primate canes were coming up on the outside of the bed, they got burned again. We didn't burn in the center except just one time. I think these are pretty much what most folks are doing now. We used AIM for both of these applications. The next 5 are very similar to those first 5, but the only difference is we were using goal instead of AIM, because I wanted to see, you know, we had seen in some trials that we were doing that the goal treatment seemed to do a better job as far as providing yield and some things like that. There was something about goal that looked better than AIM in some cases. AIM doesn't hold those primate canes back as long, so the second crop of canes comes up pretty quickly after that AIM application. Goal holds it back a little bit, and so we wanted to get a sense that looking at vigor, is using goal early, is that going to be a problem or not? So we treated early, again, full treatment beds, and no late season treatment at all with 7 or 8. So early treatment, standard treatment with 7 and 8. Number 6 was, again, nothing in the center and just one late shot of goal on the sides of the bed. 9 and 10, as I talked about with AIM, we did the early treatment with goal. This was a little different though, because I didn't want to get 2 shots of goal on there. Because again, if we're looking at vigor, I didn't want to put 2 full rates of goal on the same bed. So I did the early and standard treatment with goal, and then followed that up with the late sides of the bed treatment with AIM. So it was goal followed by AIM in this case. And then number 11, no cane burning at all. We wanted to get a sense for, if we didn't cane burn, what would the result be as far as cane growth the next season. Okay, here's some treatment dates. I'll kind of give you a rough idea of when we were doing these. And this turned into a bigger job. I should have had less treatments. I know researchers say this all the time. At least it's not a fungicide trial. I don't have to, do 7 treatments of all these things. But it turned into a lot of different things going on out there. The early treatments, if you look at these, again, 2 inches tall is what we were looking at. And the first of the treatments went out in 2017, was March 31st. You remember 2017 was very early. 2018, this year, pretty late. We were so wet out in the field that it took a while for things to happen. So we had quite a bit of a gap between the 2 early treatments in the 2 years. The standard treatments, we kind of compressed that a little bit. It was only about a week apart between the 2 years, April 14th in 2017 and April 20th in 18. The late season treatments, it really kind of depended on if we had burned it early or not. If we had not remember treatment 1 and treatment 6, we didn't do an early season treatment, we just did the late treatment. Well, if we hadn't done any full bed treatments, then we did those sides of the bed treatments with either aim or goal was April 25th and April 27th. By then, things had pretty well evened out between the 2 years. There wasn't a big difference between those 2 years at that stage of growth. If we had done the full bed at the early timing, then we went through with the late timings, May 19th in 2017 and May 14th of 18. So you notice that things had kind of switched a little bit. By then, this year was a lot warmer and things started going much faster than they had in 2017. And that was really apparent at these late sides of the beds treatments. The standard timings were done May 25th and May 22nd of the 2 years. So that gives you kind of an idea of what we're dealing with as far as the first and second treatments. Okay, let's look at some of the data. What you're looking at here are the counts. These are the number of canes that were in 25 foot a row. Randy's got his set up posts that is 25 feet between the posts. And so I just set up the plots to be easy to look at and set it up 25 foot plots. So in 2017, you can compare the 2017 number in the high vigor plots over here in this green, and the red is 2017 in the low vigor plots. The combination, on looking at those two apart, you notice I got an A and a B there. A means statistically we had more canes in the high vigor plots than we had in the low vigor plots. Not a surprise. I mean, this is what I use primarily to gauge where we put these plots, so that's not a surprise. Notice that the average number of canes in that 25 feet in the low vigor was somewhere just shy of 80 total floor canes in that 25 feet, whereas 101, 102 in the high vigor canes that year. Now, what the 2018 numbers were after the full year was over. So looking at the number of floor canes that were then going into the 2018 season. So this spring, looking at the dormant season and counting the number of canes, you can see still that the high vigor canes outnumbered the low vigor canes, statistically different. But boy, check out the growth that we saw, the increase wise. This is across all the treatments, so pay no attention to the treatments, but we had increased the canes from 70 some odd to over 100, just given the year that we had in 2018 compared to 2017. So it really did make quite a big difference. If you look at these numbers, we were up close to 140 canes in that 25 square feet. So the year really made a big difference in the vigor level of these canes. If I were to go through that and try to gauge the low vigor, I don't know that I would have called it low vigor that year compared to what we saw going into 2017. So the year made a big difference in the vigor of those canes. Now, one very busy chart. What you're seeing here are the red bars represent the low vigor canes. If you see the green bar, the green bar is the high vigor cane. So these are the number of floor canes again. What you're looking at, however, is the change from one year to the next year. So that if we see, for instance, here on number 11, you can see the low vigor increased in canes by about 68 canes from one year to the next year. So we saw an increase in canes. That's the increased number of canes that we counted. And you can see that the high vigor also increased in canes that year. So we saw relatively, between these two, really high increased canes in this number 11. Number 11 was no treated, so no cane burning at all. We saw a really good increase on all of these. Okay, so that kind of sets it up here for what I want to show you. If you look at these pairs, I mentioned the no treatment over here. Treatment number 2 and treatment number 7. Those were what we were calling the early cane burning with no late cane burning. You can see that those were also quite high in the increase for both the high vigor and low vigor. So based on these numbers, just from that single count from 2017 and 2018, it looks like the early treatment with no late treatment really did pay off as far as the increased number of canes from year to year. The only one that was higher than that was not cane burning at all. And a lot of times when you are giving something up, if you're not cane burning, you're seeing more weeds, for sure, as well as maybe there be some yield differences. And we'll talk about that in a minute. The other two that kind of showed up here, at least in the high vigor, we did see a good response if we did that late season burn as well as a standard treatment. So what folks do is a standard treatment 4 to 6 inch canes early, hit them again that second sides of the beds later on in the year. That's what showed up good on treatment 4 and treatment 9. So again, the goal, aim, either one of them seemed to have a good response in high vigor areas. Notice what happened though in the low vigor. We didn't see nearly the increase. So if you have high vigor canes, it looks like the standard treatment shouldn't cause problems. Again, year was a very important aspect of this. You look on the other end of the spectrum, the lowest ones that we saw for both high and low vigor. First of all, this one over here. I was really surprised by this. This did surprise me. Remember, this was no early, and we just did a late season burn. We did not increase the number of canes very effectively. And again, these are floor canes that were kept that you're going to have fruiting the next year. We actually saw a decrease in canes in the low vigor area by doing it that way. So it looks like full bed treatment is not a bad thing to do, even on those non-vigorous canes. But we saw also very low response in the high vigor area. So there's something about this no treatment at all that seemed to make a difference in the total fluorocane counts. If you look over on number 10, this is the one that was the standard gold treatment followed by late season aim. Also was not very good for either high or low vigor. These other ones we saw high vigor respond differently than low vigor, and I don't want to get into that too much, but these two were the ones that seemed to respond similarly between high and low vigor. Okay, let's look at yield. Yield is an important aspect. I picked these one time, so it's a snapshot. Think about a snapshot of what we're dealing with. We're dealing with grams of fruit. The number doesn't matter except we're using it as a comparison, okay? So don't get wrapped around what the number actually means. Look at the overall, what we're seeing as far as the relationship. So again, in 2017, somewhere, this 350 grams or something like that. And in 2017, in the low vigor was just under 300. So we definitely saw more yield in the high vigor side. Big surprise, right? What was interesting to me is that last year, this 2018, we did not see a statistical difference between yield on the two sides. So again, the vigor really did play a role, and I think it was the fact that we had good conditions for growing primocanes, and that meant good conditions for those fluorocanes the next year. So there's something about 2017 that was just really good that led to these higher yields. It wasn't so much a treatment effect. And it looked like in that single year, we made up the difference as far as yield, and remember the vigor was also quite similar. If you average these, we did the sampling over these 2 years, and if I average them together, that's what the green bar here represents the non-treated. So if we didn't do any cane burning at all, here's what we expected as far as yield. Notice this NS, no statistical difference based on cane burning that we saw on yield in this 2 years of data. But notice that numerically we are above this line with every single cane burning program that we had. So again, the cane burning seems to be lending itself to providing better yield, which is why we do it in the first place, or a lot of the reasons we do it, compared to the non-cane burn. So it doesn't look like what we're doing really modifies the yield too much, at least in this 2-year average. Berry weight was kind of the same thing. The first year we saw larger fruit in the high vigor compared to the low vigor. And that second year, just like yield, we did not see a difference in fruit size this last year. If you average that out across the two types, this was what the average fruit weight was, and if we follow that across, yeah, it really wasn't much difference. We ranged anywhere from 2 up to 2.4 grams per berry. I think it was interesting. I don't know, it was something about this plot. I think I just was able to pick more heavy fruit, and I do that on just to make sure that the numbers aren't too pat. We don't want to make it look like we're making these up. 2017 basically was a good year for those primocanes, which led into the fluorocanes being good in this last year. I don't have the cane counts for this year because, as many of you know, I'm a lazy guy. I don't want to go out there and count and try to figure out which one is a primocane from this year and which one's a dead floricane. So I let them do the hard work of, doing the pruning and training of these things, and then I'll count, because then I can count everything that's there. So I'm going to go out there later on when that's all done and get some cane counts. That'll give us an idea of how the 2018 treatments did as far as floricanes, and that'll give us an overall comparison. So I don't have those numbers for you now, but I'll put a little plug in for the lower mainland. Those who are maybe thinking about going up there, I should have the data by then. Ha ha. So you Canadians don't have to pay me extra money for that either. Cane burning programs 2017. We didn't see a big effect versus high vigor for 2018. The high vigor seemed to be pretty much the same. We increased all of those in about the same level in all the programs. So if you got high vigor canes, it doesn't seem to make much difference which cane burning program you use. The lowest increase was that one, again, no early treatment and only the late aim. I don't know why that was, but it was consistent across both of those. High and low vigor. Looking at the low vigor canes, this is the one that was kind of the question we were trying to answer. And if you look at those, we did see that the increase was best if we did no cane burning at all. So if you have low vigor, you might want to consider doing that, skip a year of cane burning to maybe get those things back. With the idea being that if we have a good year for primocane growth, maybe that's not going to be a big thing. Something about that dry year, though, and lots of sunshine, warm conditions, that might have made a big difference. I don't know. Cane counts increased most with no cane burning, as I said. Cane counts stayed about the same with early aim or goal with no late treatment. So that was one of the other ones that seemed to be pretty good. So you can treat early, that 1 to 2 inch canes, and not cane burn the second time. That really helped us out with our cane counts, almost as good as doing no cane burning at all. And then these other ones, this is kind of the wiggle room here. The least increase was late aim to sides only, as I noted before. But then these early goal with no late, or late goal, you can kind of parse this a lot of different ways. I think we want to aim at these early ones. We want to do these. Think about the early treatments. Aim or goal didn't seem to make much difference. But it was that late treatment seems to be the one commonality here, that we can maybe avoid that late treatment, hit it earlier than maybe what we would in a standard treatment, and that seemed to be the best on these low vigor canes, at least on Meeker. As I mentioned, 2018 was a better year for yield and fruit size than 2017. The programs, we didn't see much effect there really on yield other than that first year. The trend was for better yield with cane burning. Low vigor just did poorer that first year, but we've got a number of different things going on. I guess the bottom line on this thing for me is that we did increase the cane count. Year made a very important factor, but again, the timing of that first application may be a bigger aspect than what we would like to think about. Maybe I'll at this point take some questions if you have some questions about this, and then I'm going to go into the second aspect. Yes, sir. Wait a sec, he's got a mic coming your way. No.
This is as an observation. As there's a lot of difference in the varieties in proliferation, or the amount of new shoots that you get, and so that depends an awful lot on how you're going to run your program. One suggestion I have, and what's worked out well for me, is you go through with a real low rate of aim early, about when the plants are just about ½ an inch out of the ground, and then come along with goal on the side at about 4 inches away from the plant, and seemed to give me more cane count out of it. Goal even, like maybe even the rain can possibly kind of push it down and make goal just a little bit more aggressive for you. Yeah. Anyway, that's my.
Yeah, there are lots of ways you can modify any of this stuff. We're looking, and I think your point's well made too, that this is how Meeker responded these years. It's not necessarily how Mika will respond next year or the year after that, but we do have an idea at least that can make a difference, that cane burning can make a difference in the total number of canes. And I am interested to see what happens this next year. So thanks for your thoughts. Any other questions, comments? Okay, let's look at the baby raspberry trial. This is something we had going on really the last 3 years. This was done out on the station at Mount Vernon. We started this off in 2016, and I wanted to look at plugs in particular because it seems like the industry is kind of moving in that direction, and we really didn't have a good sense for, do we treat the plugs the same way do we do the bare roots or anything along these lines. So that first year in 2016, picked up 4 different cultivars that I wanted to look at. In 2016, we did the trial, did a little bit of change in some of the treatments we had going on based on how 2016 worked. And then we were using 3 of those 4. We dropped the Cascade Harvest, but we could get the plugs for these other ones for 2017 and 2018. And I'll talk about the herbicides here in a little bit of detail now so that you have a sense for what we were actually doing on these treatments. Well, as I said, in 2016, when we first set this up, these were the products that we were kind of aiming at. A lot of these are not registered products, and as we go through, you'll see the ones that are currently registered for this, and you can compare them with the ones that aren't registered that we're trying to gain the data from and maybe get some label changes so we can use these products on these first year plugs. 2016, what we did was applied all these post-transplant. So we put the plugs into the ground, and then we went over the top. I was using a backpack sprayer over the top of these things, and this is kind of what we saw in 2016. I will tell you, this is where we made one of the changes, and one of the changes involved these products here, Chateau and Fierce. Got these great plugs from Julie Enfield, and they were nice. But when I went over the top with Chateau and Fierce, they were screaming in the field. You could have heard them. Probably hear them over in Prosser. You know, it was very ugly, and those plants did not appreciate those treatments. So in 2018, 17 and 18, I did these 2 Chateau. I have 2 rates of Chateau and 1 rate of Fierce, which is a combination product, but it has the same flumioxazin in there, same as Chateau. That year, I did them pre-transplant. So the day before, spray them and then transplant it into treated ground. So that was the only difference for those. And that was done both in 17 and 18. Devernol, we didn't have some really good weed control with the Devernol that first year. So I replaced it because we were getting Allion getting registered. And so I was interested in looking at Allion. What would it do for these plugs? So I dropped the Devernol after 2016 and inserted Allion, again, post-transplant. So in 17 and 18, I did pre-transplant for Chateau and Fierce, and all the rest of them were post-transplant, okay? All of these then, let them grow until July, and then we did hand weeding all through the plot, so got rid of all the weeds that were there using hand weeding. So weed control at that point stopped being a factor, and I wanted to evaluate what the effect was of the early weeds or the herbicides themselves. So the rest of these will be kind of what you see here. The way I have them set up, the color difference is which ones perform better than others. If we got a red bar up here, that means that we didn't do quite so well in the level of weed control. The yellow bar meant statistically we didn't see much difference here, and they were all fairly good as far as the weed control. This was late season weed control. Now remember, we did the hand weeding in July. Nothing after that. We did 1 hand weeding, and so this represents the herbicide that might be still carrying over a little bit, coupled with a fairly dry season. So if you look at these, the ones that really didn't do too well was Zeus. Didn't seem to last very long. We got good control early, but by September or October, depending on the year, we're down about 50% total weed control by this time frame. Devernol, as I mentioned, was down low. Prowl H2O was also fairly moderate as far as weed control. Matrix here, and Simazine. The little asterisk above these are the ones that are currently registered for use on babies. So those are the treatments that you could do according to the labels. So simazine, trellis, you might know it as Gallery. They've kind of, I don't know exactly what they're doing here. Corteva is doing things a little differently, and they're introducing trellis that is really the same thing as Gallery, but it's going to be a little bit different market. So when you see trellis, think Gallery, or think Gallery and see trellis. Surfland here and Devernal are the registered treatments. So this was weed control. If you looked at it from the longest primocane growth, so what I did I had 3 plants per plot. So out of those 3 plants, whichever one was the longest primocane, either in late September, early October, I measured that. And what you're seeing here is the inches of growth in that during that growing season, essentially. The green bar across here represents what we got if we just did no herbicide at all. So this was lots of weeds early, hand weeded in July, and that became our standard as far as what a standard thing would look like. Our point here is that anything above the bar is better than the herbicides actually helped out. Anything below the bar is kind of a question. Maybe we saw some injury or something along those lines. If you look at these, you can see that this is the the pre-transplant treatments with Chateau did quite well. Fierce did well. Prowl H2O, remember, even though we got fairly poor weed control, it was one of the softer products. And then you can see that the rest were either below it, in these red bars were below the line, or roughly equal to the hand weeded. And the amount of time you have to spend on hand weeded would be more than 1. So based on these kind of things, it looks like these are products that are not currently registered, but they do hold good potential. We've got a good data set. We're going to approach these companies and see if we can get these on the label, or at the worst case, 24C, to maybe be able to use these products for new plantings. Of the registered ones, Surfland, Trellis were the best as far as weed control is concerned. By the end of the year, all of the registered treatments were doing fairly well. Surfland was one of the better ones. Devernal, Simazine, Trellis all did fairly decently. But again, we want to look at these non-registered products, see if we can't get some registrations on it. So that's ultimately what I got. I need to wrap up. Yeah, I'm getting the hook because Alan's on next, and I don't want to give him too much time because he'll talk about me. But if there's any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer one of them. Do we have time, Bill? One quick question. Oh, well, Daryl, you don't, that doesn't count for you. Yeah, you don't have quick questions.
Could you speak about the rate that you used for Allion?
Alliano is a 5 fluid ounces per acre rate. It's the standard rate for most of the crops. Okay, thank you so much. I'll be around if you have questions on any of this.
Thank you, Tim. All right. We've got the usual suspects here, as you can see. Okay. So now I'm going to ask you to help me welcome Alan Schreiber. And he's going to talk about fungicide residue decline curves, herbicide residue